Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son. There are ups and downs, glorious highs, and sometimes a low that leaves you feeling defeated.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes, but when the chips are down, we must stand up, dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Volatility. It's a funny thing. It makes you question yourself and wonder if you've made all the right decisions.
Sure, you can question some of your decisions, but stay steadfast on your goals.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
Right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Good evening and welcome. This month we completed 1 year anniversary of demonetization. I think it's an interesting time to look at the payment industry, and it's also in news these days for a variety of reasons, because a lot of people want to gain market share and burn up a lot of cash in a way, in terms of giving all these cashbacks and trying to attract consumers to their payment system. Different kind of fintech things are popular these days. Bitcoin is hitting new highs virtually every day. So just to take us through some of these things, we have Nandan today. Nandan is part of our research team at PPFAS. Nandan,
thanks. All right. Good evening, everyone. So today we'll take a look at sort of the retail payments industry, sort of the consumer payments industry. So we'll go through what were the sort of legacy ways that payments were sort of done, and then sort of what is the new evolution that has come into play. So it's, as Rajiv said, this is sort of an auspicious time to look at payments. So this is something that Mr. Raghurao Rajan had said, that we are in the midst of a revolution, and the country has the most sophisticated public payment infrastructure in the world, which can be accessible to anyone who enters the system. So and in a sense, it's quite interesting that India is at a point where there are 2-3 different sort of payment systems which are all coming online together. So we'll take a look at some of these. So in general, these are sort of the payment mechanisms that we are all aware of. The first two, first three, I don't need to explain much. The others, what you call as the card-based payments. So things like credit card, debit card. Then you have these things called as prepaid cards and charge cards. Those things sort of came into play around the 1950s. So although India, to an extent, it sort of started to pick up, let's say, in the last decade or so, those sort of innovations came around in the 1950s, and they had a huge runway to, keep growing. And then came the internet. So after sort of couple of years, when sort of internet was established, it sort of made sense that, payments also should move to the internet, and we can make payments via internet. And the last one is something that has come up very recently. So cryptocurrencies. So we'll take a look at what it is and what's happening in that space. Can't say that I'm an expert in that space at all, but what everyone seems to care about right now is just the price of these things. So Bitcoin, supposedly it's almost about to touch $10,000. And there was an article today which says that people are buying Bitcoins on credit cards. So apparently that's something that is peaking in the Google search trend, that people are searching buy Bitcoin with credit cards. So certainly we'll see what it's all about. So in terms of barter, cash, and paper-based transactions, it's pretty much everyone understands it. So I'll just go straight away to what are called as card associations. So these are some of the card associations. You would have known most of them. Visa, MasterCard, and American Express are all well known. Some of the other ones are Discover, which is also a US-based corporation. JCB is a Japan-based card association. China UnionPay is, as the name suggests, is based out of China. And RuPay is our very own card association run by National Payments Corporation of India. So it's interesting how the evolution of these card associations happened. So one of the first card association or the credit card or the charge card as it was called came out around in 1950s. So there was a business person named Frank McNamara, and he was at a restaurant in New York with his friends and having dinner. The check came, he realized he didn't have his wallet, so he had to go and call his wife to come and get the wallet. So in the meantime, he and his colleagues were discussing. He thought, is there a way that I can solve this problem of not having to see how much cash I need to carry. So they came out with these Diners Club charge card. So the idea at the time was, at the end of the month, you collect all the sort of bills that you need to pay based on restaurants that you've gone to, and you just pay them at one point. And at that time, the idea of interest on credit card was not there, but there was a spread. So if you use the card as a merchant who accepts it, he would get a little less than what would have been paid. So that was sort of the beginning of the sort of card business. And immediately afterwards, American Express was a company that started competing in this space. So American Express is also a very interesting company. It started in 1850. It started in business of express mail, actually. And they had a monopoly in that business as well. And then around the early 1900s, actually, Theodore Roosevelt, who was the president then, this was one of the companies which was sort of disbanded during the time when the Sherman Act came into play and antitrust movement sort of came into play. So it has a long legacy of getting into different businesses also as well. So something that I came up was apparently at a point they had a joint venture with Warner Communications, and American Express actually was a company that started MTV. So, and even Lehman Brothers was actually a spin-off of American Express. So American Express immediately came into that business also in 1950s. And they did pretty well, so they were able to garner quite a bit of market share. Then came Visa and MasterCard around early 60s, late 50s. And the way Visa was created was, it had its roots in Bank of America, actually. So Bank of Americard is what it was called. So Bank of America started to issue these charge cards to sort of some of their customers. And then what they realized is, instead of just one bank issuing, let's create a whole network. So MasterCard was also created as a sort of a network of different banks. So MasterCard was sort of an entity in which all banks came together, and they would set up certain payment standards, and all those banks would follow those standards. So both these companies came out of California, and now they are all dominant companies. Discover today is another sort of card association. Diners Club is actually now part of Discover. JCB is sort of a strong card association out of Japan, and what they have done is outside of Japan they will partner with whoever is strong in that particular geography. And the same thing China UnionPay does, same thing RuPay also does. China UnionPay is interesting that it's pretty much a virtual monopoly in China. So till now, sort of Visa, MasterCard have not really been able to or not allowed to compete in China. So UnionPay has a very strong position. And in fact, it's almost equal in standing with Visa in terms of the size of their business, even though Visa is much more spread globally. So ex-China, if you look at the payment industry, Visa controls 50% of the payment volumes market. And ex-China, MasterCard would be around 30%. So these are card associations. Now, what do these card associations do? So card associations, what they do is create certain regulations and rules, which every sort of bank which is part of that association has to follow. So, and in this, there are two types of structures. So we'll look at both of them. So the first one is what is called as a four-party structure. So four-party structure, what is there? So Visa and MasterCard are cases in which operate under the four-party structure. So how does it work? You have an acquiring bank, you have an issuing bank, and you have a card association. Besides that, there is something called as the processor or an ISO. So we'll take a look at what their role is in the whole payment chain. And then you have your customer and merchant. So the way it works is the acquiring bank is in the business of finding merchants. So let's say somebody has a restaurant, they want to accept cards, then different acquiring banks will come to them and say that, open a merchant account with us, we'll give you, all these facilities, we may even finance you, we will clear your payments, in 7 days, we will provide you with all the billings and all the software that is required to you. And so the merchant ties up with what is called as an acquiring bank. So generally when you sort of pay at a sort of a restaurant, you will find that the bill there is name of a certain bank, and generally that would be the acquiring bank. Now acquiring bank may or may not go out themselves and acquire the customer. So an ISO that you see is something is called as an independent sales organization. So imagine if you have thousands and thousands or millions of merchants. A single bank cannot go out and sort of acquire each and every merchant. So they work through ISOs. So ISOs, sometimes they will have their own merchant acquisition arm as well, but they will use other third-party, other ISO organizations as well. And ISOs will come and sell you on these merchant accounts. Then you have something called as processor. So processor is someone who is sitting there and transmitting using the, when a credit card transaction is made, processor is someone who will relay that information. So that information travels from the merchant through the processor to the card association. So processors also then do partake themselves, and they themselves also acquire merchants. So they also do certain functions of ISO, and certain ISOs will act as resellers for processors as well. So imagine it's a very large network of a lot of companies which go out to acquire merchants. So that is the acquisition side of merchant, that banks would want to be in the payment chain. So they will get current accounts, merchant accounts through ISOs. Processors also sometimes do that. And they themselves also sometimes do that. On the issuing side, we've all experienced it. So we have a bank account, and generally our own bank will say that why don't you get a credit card? They'll look at certain parameters. They'll look at your score. They'll look at your CIBIL score. They'll look at history of your savings account. They can see how much money comes in, money comes out. So they will put in the parameters. They'll see, okay, this person I can give this credit card. They'll set a limit. So, and they'll issue a credit card. So that is the issuing bank. So issuing bank is in the business of giving out credit card to individuals. And all banks generally do both of these businesses. So it's not like certain people do only one and not the other. All large banks will essentially do both. And a card association is generally sort of an intelligent switch, which sits in the middle, and it does two things. So at the point of transaction, when you swipe your card, it relays the information to basically do the authorization of transaction. So the first leg of a transaction is the authorization leg. And the second leg, which may not happen immediately, is the settlement. So they may authorize the transaction may go through, and then at the end of the day, they generally would have something like a batch settlement. So those are essentially the players. Now, how does the money flow? So let's say a customer goes and spends 100 rupees at a merchant. What happens is, the merchant is, when he signs up for a merchant account, he signs up for what is called as a merchant discount rate. Now, a merchant discount rate generally tends to be around 2.5% or so. So when a customer pays him 100, generally at some point in time when he receives the money, he will receive 97.5. So 2.5% gets cut out. Now that 2.5 that gets cut out gets distributed amongst these different players. The largest chunk of it goes to the issuing bank. And this is called as the interchange rate. That interchange rate is also set by card associations and banks together. So an interchange rate is set. And it is fixed for everyone. So it doesn't matter if the merchant is a 1,000 crore entity or a merchant is a 1 crore entity. That interchange rate remains same. So the interchange rate is generally about 70% of this discount rate. So out of 2.5 rupees, you can say around 1.7, 1.8 tends to go generally to the issuing bank. The card association like Visa and MasterCard generally tend to earn from around 10 to 20 basis points per transaction. That's what the card associations will earn, the Visas and the MasterCards of the world. And the rest will get split between the acquiring bank, the processor, and the ISO. So largest chunk of it goes to the issuing bank. Besides that, the issuing bank also earns, let's say, card fees. So in case you've got a card which you have to pay an annual fee, then that money will go to the issuing bank. As well as if you have a credit card debt that you have not cleared off within the stipulated time, then that carries a interest. And generally that interest is pretty high. So they will earn on those credit card balances as well. So issuing is sort of the most lucrative arm, you can say, in the whole chain. Most lucrative in the sense gets the biggest chunk of the whole discount rate. So this is what is called as a four-party system. And so generally, I think the number for both Visa and MasterCard is both have around 20,000 partner sort of issuing banks. So around the world. So around 20,000 banks or so will issue you either a Visa credit card or a debit card or a MasterCard, Visa card or a debit card. So it's a huge entrenched network that they have. Interestingly, these companies did not start out as sort of a profit-making entity. Initially, the idea was just as a way to, for banks to sort of work together. And then eventually, these companies came to IPO very recently, actually, somewhere around 2007, 2008 is when they did IPOs, and they became separate entities. So that's sort of the four-party system. Now there is one more called as the three-party system. So this is what is called as a closed loop or a three-party system. So American Express and Discover are sort of examples of the three-party system. So in this case, what the difference is that essentially the whole function of acquiring, issuing, and processing the transaction, authorization and settlement, is done via one entity. So American Express will issue the cards to you, and they will go out and acquire merchants as well. So, and whatever transaction happen, they are called as closed loop transactions, because it's like they have gone and acquired, let's say, a travel company, which, let's say, or an airlines company which accepts their card. So they themselves have gone out. Again, that also may happen through another independent sales organization. They may hire resellers to sell their services, but they are acquiring merchants as well, and they are acquiring sort of individuals, customers as well. So let's say that you use an Amex card and you go to a particular restaurant, and if they accept that Amex card, that acquisition is also done via Amex. In the case of, let's say, a four-party system, you can have, let's say, acquisition, let's say, done by Axis Bank, whereas your issuing bank may be HDFC Bank. Here, both the end of the legs are with American Express. So that gives them sort of a more unique insight in terms of the whole payment chain. The other interesting thing is, so the way Amex makes money is, they will make money on card fees. They will earn majority of the discount rate. So it's not that they will earn all of it. There will be some other players as well. There will be a processor also. They may use independent sales organizations also. So certain fees do go to them as well. But they will earn bulk of the fees. The other advantage that an American Express has is, they are better able to target and market to their customer base, because they know very well who their customer is and where they are going, where they are shopping. So in that sense, there is an additional amount of information that they themselves can use to better their business. And on top of that, we'll see that they have a particular strategy. So if you look at this, this is a slightly dated data. But sort of payment volume, so for Visa and MasterCard, it includes debit card as well. For American Express, it would only include credit card data. But you will see that if you were to look at the payment volume, so today, so Visa does not include Visa Europe, which they've acquired now. It was a separate entity before. But if you look at the cards in force, so Visa, according to this data, about 2.4 billion cards in force. Today, actually, that's more than 3 billion. And if you look at the payment volume, around 4.7 trillion. Now, if you divide 4.7 trillion by the cards in force, you'll get around sort of 2,000 kind of a number per year. And similar is the case for MasterCard. If you look at American Express, it's about 1 trillion in payments and around a little over 100 million in cards. So it's about 10,000 per sort of card per year. So there is a vast difference between them. So if you look at, so this is from the American Express investor presentation. So they are comparing themselves to Visa and MasterCard, and what is the average spend for a US card per year. So you can see that American Express is a significantly higher number. And the way they do it is generally the pricing for discount rate that American Express sets. So what they try and do is they try and get the most affluent customers. So if people here are American Express customers, clearly they're the creme de la creme customers. And everyone wants to go for those customers. So what American Express does is, and how they've entrenched that position is, they have a higher discount rate relative to what Visa and a MasterCard, the whole four-party system charges. So what happens is, let's say in a particular case, let's say if that particular, let's say airline company is accepting all three of them, Visa, MasterCard, and American Express. Let's say Visa and MasterCard is charging them 2% as the discount rate. American Express may be charging them 2 or 2.5, 2.6. So because their customers are the most affluent, because they are high spenders, a merchant cannot say that I will not accept a American Express sort of card holder because you guys are charging me 2.6%, whereas Visa and MasterCard are charging me a lower discount rate. So what American Express is able to do is essentially transfer some of the benefits, sort of get a little bit more out of the merchant, keep little bit for itself, and transfer little bit to the customer via a better rewards program. So that's where the reward program comes in. Generally, any credit card, and the ones which are sort of the higher ones, will have a higher rewards kind of in relation to your spend. So the way these reward programs get funded is via the discount rate. So if somebody is able to charge higher discount rate, he's capturing that value from the merchant, keeping it some for himself, and transferring it, some of it, to the customer via rewards program. So generally, the merchants hate credit cards. If they could somehow figure out a way where they could work without credit cards, they would love it. But the general truth is that, and they've tried it as well. So there have been instances where merchants have tried to pool together to create certain payment sort of payment mechanism where they don't have to pay as high a discount rate as possible, because if you think about it, 2% margin you are just giving up for the payment. So certainly if they could figure out a way, they would do it, but historically it's not happened. So in fact, there was one company which tried it, which tried to, instead of woo the customers, they tried to woo the merchants, but the customers would just not use those cards. So in this sense, the customer is really taken care of by the credit card industry, as long as you're paying your dues in time. If you're not paying your dues in time, there is a very high interest rates that you have to pay. Otherwise, your reward programs is sort of funded via the merchants in a sense. And if you look at the number for American Express, probably 1/3 of their revenues that they generate from discount rate goes back to rewards programs. So somewhere around 7 billion or so every year, that would be their expense for the rewards program. So that's essentially money that got captured and transferred. So that sort of in a nutshell is how the credit card business works. The debit card business is pretty much similar, except that most countries will have a ceiling on the discount rate that you can charge. So India, I think that the ceiling is 1% is what you can charge, and that also for smaller transaction it's 0.25 or 0.5%. And so most of the countries will have certain ceiling for debit card. Credit card generally is higher because it involves giving credit to the customer. So there is a certain risk associated. So till now it has not happened that there has been a lot of pressure on the interchange rates or the discount rate. Although in Europe, you do see a certain amount of regulation coming in that may sort of curtail certain interchange rates as well. So just looking today at what is the market in India, what is sort of the debit card outstanding, credit card outstanding in India. So it's quite interesting. Debit cards, so what I've tried to do is, this is sort of month end data. So the top left, the first column is the number of POS terminals. So you can see that number of POS terminals in India is around 2.9 billion, and we see a very sharp jump from last September to this September. So that's quite interesting. It's almost doubling. I couldn't find any particular article which sort of goes into this and what is exactly happening, but it's quite an interesting number. So I don't know if they've changed the way they classify something or it's actually doubling of those numbers. The other thing, if you see the credit card outstanding, the second column and the fourth column, debit card outstanding, you'll notice there's a vast difference in the number of debit cards. So we have around 819 million debit cards outstanding, around 81 crore. And the number of credit cards outstanding is around 3.3 crore. So it's a large difference. The other interesting thing that you can find is, if you go down in the table below, I've just done year-over-year growth rates. So you'll see that actually that credit card growth rate itself has accelerated. So we are still at a very low base in terms of credit card penetration. And if this is a payment mechanism that people will use, then there is a large room for growth that is available. Whereas debit card, you can say that growth rates have actually come down because to an extent, it's not about 819 million, it's quite a large number. In terms of spend also per card per month, I've just put a trend to it. You can see that those numbers are also going up. So you'll find that a lot of banks now are actually aggressively increasing issuing of credit cards. And one of the reasons behind that is actually in the last decade or so, these credit bureaus like CIBIL have come into place. And there is actually enough data on which these guys can be comfortable in figuring out whether to issue a credit card or not to issue a credit card. So it is not that the banks were reluctant or something like that. It is an ecosystem which is being developed, which gives comfort to banks as well to go out and issue credit cards. So we'll see in terms of debit card, RuPay is dominating, I think around over 40 to 50%, somewhere around there is their market share. So now moving on from sort of the credit card and debit card, the next set of payments are related to what is called as UPI, United Payments Interface. And then you have these wallets, and then now you have these payment banks as well, payments bank. So National Payments Corporation of India is quite interesting. So it was set up as a not-for-profit company, and A.H. Hota was the sort of leading this company for a long time. He has retired recently, but he's certainly a rock star, and there is a article on him in the recent Forbes India magazine, so I would encourage you to sort of look at it. So he has been sort of instrumental in bringing up payment systems. So the way NPCI was created was, it was created as a not-for-profit institution. The shareholders are actually 10 banks, the founding shareholders. So you had 6 PSUs, 2 private sector banks, and I think 2 international banks. And then I think more banks came into play, and more banks are also shareholders of it. But essentially, it's an organization which is owned by banks. So it's an entity which banks are sort of using to create different payment systems. And a lot of it is sort of government also sort of encouraging and pushing sort of digital payments. So some of the things below are the old sort of systems. I won't dwell too much on it. We'll look at some of the new ones. So RuPay is a card scheme which is run by NPCI. They are coming out with something called as RuPay contactless, which is supposedly the idea is that it should be a contactless payments for any sort of transit or any sort of area where, let's say you're at a toll booth and if you have a contactless kind of a payment system, it would be faster. So they're working on that. United Payments Interface is the most interesting one. Actually, Immediate Payment System, IMPS as it's known, UPI is actually made on top of the IMPS platform. Now, the IMPS platform, for several reasons, did not take off to the level that people expected. The idea behind UPI is to make it very easy and seamless. So the idea is sort of single-click, two-factor authentication is what they say. So the idea would be if one person wants to transact with another, all you need to know is that person's UPI address. So the address will be sort of generally your name at the rate of, let's say, HDFC Bank or at the rate of Axis Bank. And you link your own sort of UPI app that you have with your bank account. So it'll provide 24/7 instant payment. And the costs are also very minimal. So we'll see what the numbers for UPI are. BHIM, which is known as Bharat Interface for Money, is actually just sort of something which sits on top of UPI. And it's promoted by NPCI. So it's like an app which you can use to transact. So it's like a bare bones app, but other banks also have their own app to which enable you to have sort of UPI transactions on the UPI platform. The other interesting thing is Aadhar Enabled Payments and Aadhar Payment Bridge. So this is more to do with sort of a rural economy. So Aadhar Payment Bridge allows anyone with a bank account where they have the Aadhar enabled account, any subsidy gets directly paid to them to that account instead of, so it's a seamless way to disburse subsidies. The other thing is Aadhar enabled payment systems are something where a micro ATM is what is called, and that micro ATM can be used to deposit money, withdraw money, and even transfer money to anyone who has an Aadhar linked account. So all these different schemes are being run to sort of deepen the digital sort of transactions, digital payments, because India still today is mainly a cash dominated sort of society. So then you have Bharat Bill Pay is another platform to pay sort of your phone bill or your DTH bill, so on and so forth. Bharat QR is sort of the idea. So we'll look at what QR is. So QR is, you all must have seen, there is a sort of this square thing with, there are some squares which are in black, and there is some sort of a design, and that's sort of your unique QR code as it's known, and you can use that to pay. You can scan it and you can pay someone. So UPI started in 2016, and it's interesting. So if you see UPI on the right, you have the volume and the rupees in millions. So October 2017, the data shows around 76.5 million transactions and about 7,000 crore of transactions in terms of in 1 month on UPI platform. So if you look at the credit card data, credit card transaction at a POS machine was around 37,000 crores. So 7,000 crores in just 1 year of existence, it's a significant number. Debit cards are also around at 37,000 crores or thereabout. So they've given the number of sort of iOS downloads also, so close to around 20 million downloads of the BHIM app as well. So yeah, another thing that RBI has pushed is wallets. So there are different types of wallets. So the earliest type of wallets were what were called digital wallets. So essentially what they did was a way to just store your certain cards. So MasterCard has MasterPass and Visa checkout. PayPal has One Touch. And even Amazon provided essentially a digital wallet also initially, where what you do is just save your card information so that it is secure and you can check out very quickly. And sometimes even you can check out on different websites. So Amazon being a trusted party, if you are a small retailer who is online, you can say pay via Amazon. And so the credit card data is secure with Amazon, and it's easy for them to transact. So those are generally what are called digital wallets. Now, the interesting ones that have grown quite rapidly are the prepaid wallets, or prepaid instruments as they are called. So RBI classifies them in 3 categories: closed, semi-closed, and open. So closed are something like ClearTrip as a wallet, where basically if you made a transaction and there are some refunds or there are some rebates that you're getting, that goes into that wallet. And you cannot use those outside of their own website. You can't use them outside of ClearTrip. That's sort of an idea of a closed wallet. Ola also had a closed wallet. Now actually they are moving towards a semi-closed wallet, where they are opening it up for other merchants. The most famous semi-closed wallet would be Paytm, although now Paytm is going to have Paytm wallet as well as bank, and the other one is MobiKwik. So these are essentially wallets which you can use to transact on different merchants. And the closed ones are the open ones are the ones which are sort of issued by banks, where you can use them to even transact on an ATM or so on and so forth. So we'll basically sort of look at the semi-closed wallet, and in specifically, Paytm, because that's sort of the poster child for digital payments. The next day of demonetization, we all saw the advertisement by Paytm. So they are certainly doing something right. So we'll see what they are doing. So Vijay Shekhar Sharma is the founder of Paytm, and he's quite an interesting guy. So he was a good student, and he reached college when he was 15. But unfortunately, his schooling was not in English. So he struggled for a while, but he sort of he learned English himself, and he's the founder of Paytm, and it's a very interesting journey that he has. So Paytm was founded by Vijay Shekhar Sharma. So essentially, a lot of these wallets sort of started out as prepaid mobile recharge website. Freecharge was also one of them. So Paytm wallet then came in 2013, and at the end of 2015, they got a license to run a payments bank. And as of now, Alibaba and SoftBank are 2 significant investors. So the story was that he was, Jack Ma is his hero, and he wanted to emulate him. So he had a meeting with Jack Ma, was scheduled to be for 20 minutes, and apparently they spoke for 2 hours. So that seems to be a sort of a standard story for a lot of business relationships, I suppose. So Paytm has a wallet, and it has a payments bank as well. So just to understand what they're offering and what they can and what they cannot do. So the payment bank, you can keep up to 1 lakh rupees. They'll give you an interest today, they are saying 4%. As of now, there's no checkbook that comes along. There's a virtual debit card that comes along. The payments bank are not allowed to lend. So what they have done right now is they're going to tie up with ICICI Bank. So if somebody wants credit through Paytm payments bank, then it gets disbursed. The loan gets created on ICICI Bank's balance sheet, and these guys will earn some sort of a fee. So, plus they will at some point introduce more sort of third-party products, let's say mutual funds and insurance as well. So the interesting thing about Paytm, if you think about it, it's a very similar kind of a business to a closed loop card company. So what does Paytm do? It acquires both merchants as well as customers. So Paytm says that they have around 200 million customers, wallet customers in India. Now that is a very significant number, 20 crore customers. And they are saying that, this number is not quite clear, but they are saying that they have around 5 million merchants. Now 5 million merchants, and we looked at the number of POS machines that are there in India. The number of POS machines is 2.9 million. And this guy is saying that we have 5 million merchants. So merchant acquisition and customer acquisition, they both have in both those cases, they have a very strong position. And one helps the other. If you have more merchants which accept your payment mechanism, then more customers would want to join you. And the other way around as well. If there are lots of customers, then a merchant cannot say that I will not accept this payment mechanism. So they have a very entrenched and a strong position. Today what they are doing is, to an extent, they are not charging all the merchants that they could charge. So in terms of offline merchants, they are, from my understanding, they are not charging them. At some point, they would want to charge or monetize it in some way. But as of now, they are not charging customers. Besides that, they have sort of created a marketplace as well. So there is Paytm Mall where merchants can sell their products. So they are creating sort of that as well. And the amount of sort of capital that they have promised to put in the business is quite significant. So 11 payments bank licenses were given, and I think 3 of them have already given back their license. And it seems very difficult that, if one guy already has 200 million customers, I'm sure the other guys will also try with, higher interest rate on the balances or, certain discounts. But at the end, we'll see how many, wallets people are willing to have. So this guy is really entrenched, and he has the investors backing him to keep that entrenched position. So based on their website, they say about 1.99% is what they charge to merchants. From my understanding, right now they are not charging the offline merchants. The other reason why they have been able to scale their merchant network is getting a POS machine, opening a merchant account. All those things are capital intensive and time intensive as well. Whereas if you're a merchant who wants to accept Paytm, all you need is to sort of just have this QR code that you paste at your sort of place of where the transaction is going to be made, and that person can just scan that QR code, or even a phone number is also enough in certain cases to make a transaction. So the capital cost that is required to create a network of merchants is not significant. Essentially, they can acquire merchants at a lower cost and at a faster pace, and that is what they have already done. Plus, in a country like India, a lower cost would always be appreciated. So some of the credit card companies are now issuing these cards with NFC chips, near field communication chips. And you can get phones also which have these NFC chips, and so it makes the transaction a little faster. All you have to do is, so Visa has this PayWave where you just wave your credit card and the transaction is completed. So as a service, that sounds very interesting, that you don't need to, you can just wave your wallet and that transaction can be complete. But there are certain costs associated with that. So you would have to issue new credit cards to people with an NFC chip in it, or the phones should have an NFC chip in it. Whereas in a country like India, something like QR code could pick up. So in China, QR codes have actually picked up quite a bit. So QR seems to be a sort of a good fit for India. So a lot of people are working on QR-based payments as well. And Google has recently come out with something what they called as AQR. I don't know if it was a play on the banks, but so AQR is audio QR. So what you do in that is, there is a unique audio QR that is generated for every sort of account or every phone. And so if you have two phones which are nearby, they communicate via audio QR. And then you can facilitate a transaction. So instead of having to scan and that camera focuses and then you, sometimes it doesn't focus, sometimes it's too long, sometimes that doesn't go through. This audio QR may be a more seamless kind of an approach. And I think even Paytm is working on something similar. So this thing has actually come out and it seems to have picked up. So payment space is certainly a space where everyone is interested, because the economics of the business are such that generally there is some sort of winner-take-all effect, and it's a large market. So a lot of the technology companies, even WhatsApp is going to sort of have payments within WhatsApp at probably very soon. So it's a space where everyone is trying to work for the customer to make the payment very user-friendly. So we'll see what sort of, who comes out as the winner. And the last thing I thought we can just speak a little bit about, given that, cryptocurrencies, have been in the news so lately. So cryptocurrencies are sort of used as a payment mechanism, and generally they are used as a payment mechanism where you don't want to reveal your transaction. So it's something that criminals and money launderers do use a lot. Now, there is a very interesting statement made by Lloyd Blankfein, the CEO of Goldman Sachs. So he sort of did not take a very hard stance. He's like, we'll see what happens. And he said something like this, if we were to move from hard money to fiat money to consensus money, then so be it. So he called cryptocurrency as consensus money, which was, I think, a very accurate statement. So what is fiat money, right? So fiat money is what essentially central bank of a country says that this is legal tender. And it is not backed by any commodity. It's just the supply and demand of that currency is controlled by the central bank, and we all accept it as having a particular value, and we exchange goods and services with fiat money. Consensus money is not backed by any government. Consensus money is where we all agree that this is money, and as long as we agree that it's money, it's money. So if something like a Bitcoin were to come into place and people were to accept it, it would have consequences for governments as well. So generally governments would like to track payments, government would like to have control over the economy. If Bitcoins come into place, that is sort of a threat at the central bank. So we'll see if at some point the government or the central bank steps into, with certain regulations. So today, whether people are buying Bitcoin because they believe in Bitcoin and then they think that this is something that is sort of the way forward for store of wealth and transaction, we don't know. Or probably people are buying Bitcoin today because people have money, made money on Bitcoin, and Bitcoin keeps going up. So certainly there are more people searching on how to buy Bitcoin and how to make money on Bitcoin rather than what is Bitcoin. So we'll see. So there are a couple of other currencies as well which are there. Bitcoin seems to be the largest one in terms of sort of the market cap that it has. The idea is, and so the Bitcoin is based on a technology which is called as blockchain. So what blockchain is instead of having one sort of a central database that gets updated, and the way it gets updated is there are certain rules and regulations that you have, so that there no mistakes are made, and then you keep checking whether everything is correct. Blockchain tries to essentially farm out that work to many different individuals or anyone who is willing to give their computing power to be part of validating those transactions. So what you have is sort of a distributed ledger is what a blockchain creates. So blockchain certainly seems to be an interesting and a very relevant technology, and people will figure out where to use blockchain, where it makes sense, where it doesn't make sense. So Bitcoin works on the blockchain technology. So blockchain is a very interesting offshoot of these cryptocurrencies. And it seems that it will certainly have a sort of some use cases. In terms of cryptocurrency, we'll see with time, what happens. It may have a place in society. What it will be dependent on individuals and government over time. So that's sort of the cryptocurrency. Yeah, thanks. So any questions or anything?
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. My experience has been, maybe I'm the unlucky one. Most of the people don't want to accept the American Express card, most of the merchants.
That's true.
And is it because the number of merchants is very few, and but they charge too much, they don't pay enough to the merchant, it seems.
Right. So,
I mean, at least 50%, I would say 60% merchants are not interested in the American Express.
Right, that's true. So American...
Not only in India, even in Europe. In Europe, in fact, 90% they don't want.
Right, so American Express has been trying to sort of cover that gap. So Visa and MasterCard, some 2012 number that I'd seen had around 33 million merchant locations. In US, American Express is more comprehensive than outside of US. They are working on it, but their main focus will be to get your high value transactions. So if you have an American Express and let's say you have another Visa, you spend, let's say $15,000, but let's say on $10,000 you are spending on travel, then if they can get that $10,000, they would be certainly happy. Now, that... Right, so that's true. So somebody will basically have two cards and they will use the Amex for the high value because they'll get more rewards also. Now, it's not so easy. Certainly Visa and MasterCard are also going for the high value customers. So that's not the case. And actually Amex has to now close that parity. And so whenever they speak, they will also constantly update investors on what they are doing to sort of close that gap between Amex and themselves and Visa and MasterCard.
Thanks, Ronak. But by the way, if you use Amex, they have the best programs around and you can get a lot of rewards out of it.
That's true. That's the whole idea behind it, that there is a certain value that they are able to extract more than a Visa and a MasterCard in general, on average. And they relay that to the customer and some of it back to themselves. So that is sort of the idea that you can favor your customer. Both are their customer. The merchant.
Absolutely. Now my question is regarding cryptocurrencies. So I was I was just telling him that if he wants to get an Amex, it's an amazing program in India. Okay. Having said that, they've been around for a while. If there was actually a lot of substance in this subject of having cryptocurrencies, I'm just thinking, why haven't so many governments sort of embraced it happily? One thing, there are 200 of them which have mushroomed. There are 200 cryptocurrencies, or maybe I don't know how many, right? That's on one part. Now, if from a tax and from a government point of view or an administration point of view, see, as in any country, we are already dealing in hundreds of currencies. Already. In the sense, we are exporting services, we are exporting products, so we are getting payments in yen, and we are getting payments in dollars, euros, Singapore dollars, all of that. And we are just converting everything to Indian rupees and filing our balance sheets. So in that sense, there is also an exchange rate with all these cryptocurrencies. So that way, it should not be too difficult for trade and commerce to embrace it. But the point is, like you mentioned, there is actually, it's like a consensus currency. So
Right.
you and I agree that this is currency and
Right.
therefore let's trade on it.
Right.
So I'm just thinking, is there research? Why has no government really accepted it? If this was the future, blockchain is an amazing technology that is given, but why has no government ever
So
accepted?
there are two things. One is government would want to have control over the transactions and have transparency. They want to be able to see it. So if any cryptocurrency which is not going to allow them to see the transactions clearly, certainly they would not be against it. The other is from the central bank's perspective. So not all cryptocurrencies have the same rules and regulations, but from my understanding, Bitcoin is, they've said that 21 million Bitcoins is all the Bitcoins that there are ever going to exist. So if you have stated that that is the case, and if the number of Bitcoins is going to remain constant, now generally during a recession, the central bank or the reserve bank of any country will want to expand the monetary base. Now if that is constant, then it can be quite deflationary also. These are just theories. I mean, you can have a currency which allows the expansion of monetary base, but then who regulates that? The idea would be a central bank would want the power to expand or contract the monetary base. So whether that would be available in cryptocurrency, I'm not sure. Correct. So you would not be able to control the interest rates to the extent you would want to. You can buy half a Bitcoin. No, you can. You can buy half a Bitcoin. Yeah. You can buy fractional Bitcoins. Yeah. I don't know the legality of it. From my understanding, they treat it as a commodity. So if you make profits on it, it's like a commodity, something like that. But it seems that most people are buying Bitcoin because people have made money on Bitcoin rather than using Bitcoin as a way of store of wealth or payment. Nobody goes to the theater by paying Bitcoin. That should be it should be the end use that should prompt people to use it. But it's not the end use today, at least.
Excuse me.
Sorry.
Hi. I just want to check with you, from the numbers you were showing, the penetration of debit cards and credit cards is very low in India.
Right. Debit is not so bad.
Yeah. But in addition, the government of India has come out with so many more options in terms of trying to take us digital.
Right.
In all the research that you've done, have you seen something like this in any other country where we've experimented with so many, I mean, experiment is a wrong word, but we've given so many options for payment anywhere, or what's the learning?
I think a lot of countries are doing it. Even China, if you see, QR-based payments has taken off quite a bit. In terms of credit card, it's quite entrenched in China. They have all these apps like Alipay and WeChat, where you can use sort of these chat-based apps for payment, as well as sort of you can get loans also from those apps. So certainly China is at the forefront. I think India is at the forefront. What happens in a country like US is it's not that they are not doing all this. They are doing it, but when you have a base of people which are so used to using credit cards for so long, they will continue to use. There will be a little bit of switching cost issues that will come up. So markets in India may grow and accept, let's say, QR-based payments much more rapidly. Over there, they already have, millions of POS machines, so they don't feel the need or why take that burden of learning and go to a new system. So,
just one question, like, what is the future of this independent digital payment banks like Paytm and MobiKwik and all? Because, I mean, when the banks themselves have a some kind of a facility,
right?
They have some sort of payment methods. Why one would go into this kind of independent this thing?
So already 3 have given the licenses back. I don't know if all of them will survive and how much So all of the payments banks will also not have the same business model. So the telcos will try and sort of look at it as an add-on service, possibly. Then if that works, then they will try and add more and more services to it. All of them will not have the same business model, but somebody like, so MobiKwik, I don't think they've got, they are still a wallet. I'm not sure if they've got a payments bank license, but both MobiKwik and Paytm have a large customer base.
That's mainly because of the first mover advantage, I suppose.
There is a first mover advantage, and to some extent, the service that they provide is also quite good. So, I mean,
see, ultimately, if I want to make a payment using Paytm, I have to transfer the money from my bank account to Paytm. Then I make a payment from the Paytm. When my bank itself start giving me that facility, why would I use the Paytm?
So the banks today are already giving the facility. Whenever I do a Paytm, I'll get a message from my bank saying that why don't you use our app?
So what is the future?
So I think Paytm is quite entrenched. So when you already have, I use Paytm for 2-3 different services and it's on autopilot already for me. So why do I want to really reverse it? Where I will not use Paytm today probably is to make a sort of a high value kind of a purchase, which is where Paytm at some point should be in, because that's where a lot more money could be there. So potentially, let's say, hotel booking, or they're there in airlines and hotel. It's not that they are not there. But today, if you're getting a very good rewards card,
what is the incentive to use Paytm when I can do the same thing with HDFC Bank card? Or
I think at some point it'll be ease, and some point it'll be rewards. Rewards will play a part in high value transactions. So if Paytm decides to enter that, they will have to compete on capital as well, and not only on ease and convenience. Sorry? So wallets are not allowed to pay interest. Payments bank will pay an interest, and they will essentially invest that money in government securities. So they cannot invest in other fancy things. Yeah, it's a limit of 1 lakh rupees. So in that sense also, they won't have huge balances. They won't be able to garner such huge balances probably. Safety-wise, it's a tough thing to know. I mean, it is safe. It's not so. It's if you are doing Paytm via UPI, it's the same thing as what a bank is doing as well. And even if you do a wallet transaction, is essentially it's in the behind it's that money gets transferred from one bank to another. So in that sense, it's I don't know if there is in particular difference in between the safety. I would not be aware of, but from my understanding, it's not been an issue till now. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Hi. How is this valuation done of this payment banks currently?
It's a good question. I don't know the exact answer. I think my most probable guess will be they will have some business model in terms of where they will generate revenue from. Correct. From products or from transactions. And then they will sort of estimate that steady state I should be able to earn this kind of a revenue. And based on that, they would do a model. But I wouldn't know exactly what would be the...
Currently, Paytm would be in losses, right? Any idea?
I think from whatever they have, it's been public, there were losses.
Okay.
But
as per the last transaction, their valuation is 30,000 crore.
Right. So these businesses, the way it works is, one is someone like a SoftBank and Alibaba today is acting like a consolidator of businesses. So you see that happening in ride-sharing apps also, where they are coming and essentially brokering these deals where, they are sort of ending competition to an extent. They are buying out other sort of funds, creating a strong sort of equity, and then they are trying to now make these companies profitable. So the idea with a lot of these things, what venture capitalists try and do is create scale and then operate at that scale like a monopoly with monopoly economics kind of a situation. So I don't see a particular reason why, whether it plays out, we'll see.
Okay. And just one more clarification, you said debit cards, if we swap at any merchant, so currently it's 1% is deducted.
Right, so in India, the merchant discount rate for debit card over 2,000 rupees is I think 1%. Something between 1,000, 2,000 is 0.5 and below that it's 0.25. So that's sort of mandated.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What is the requirement? Why is there so many payments paying systems? One payment system should be enough, no?
So I think the answer is that there is a lot of money to be made in this business. So a lot of smart people want to go into that business. And I think it does have some kind of winner take all kind of economics involved in it. So once the dust settles at some point, there will be consolidation. That would be my guess. Because I just don't see people using 5-7 payment mechanisms, on a consistent basis. So at some point, look at free charge, right? So free charge, at a point, I think Snapdeal bought them at a valuation of 400 million. And finally now Axis has bought them at, I think, some 50 million or 60 million valuation. So to some extent, that's already happening.
But actually, the merchant is paying for everything.
Right, so what the merchant...
And the customer, because my question is that from some petrol pumps, if I use my credit card, they charge a surcharge for it.
Right.
They're not paying for it, I'm paying for it.
Right.
Is that allowed?
Yeah.
No, what do you mean refund? I am buying, say, 1,000 rupees worth of petrol and they charge 30-40 rupees on my credit card for that. So who gives me the refund?
So merchants, it's sort of generally people tend to spend more with credit card. That's one of the ideas. Beyond the convenience of not carrying cash, it's sort of a psychological aspect to it that you will generally tend to spend more. So that's what the credit card companies will say, that if you have credit card and if some customer keeps coming to you, then you can have certain marketing arrangements also that to that customer you can give discounts and all, so on and so forth. So the idea for the merchant is more transactions, but they generally tend to see the merchant discount rate and get annoyed by it, which is a fair argument. And they've tried to work at it and reduce, but to limited success, some success, but not to the extent they would like.
Yeah. Just as you mentioned that Bitcoin is considered to be the global consensus money. So if we take some numbers, as you stated, about 21 million Bitcoins will be there.
Right.
And more acceptance happen, and say eventually or in some due course of time, the $80 trillion of global economy, I think the value of Bitcoin then will work out to something like $3.9 million per Bitcoin.
Right.
So if the consensus keeps on going up, the value keeps on going up, is that going to be one of the big cause of global kind of, bubble or something irrational, meaning?
So for that to happen, everyone has to accept, including the governments, that Bitcoin is going to be sort of a payment and mechanism. Which I understand your point. So if Bitcoin is the only currency in the world, then it has to back all the wealth in the world. But whether that happens is, because today people are not buying it for that reason. The people are just buying it because it's gone up. So
I think eventually it is consensus which is the root cause of every bubble. And are we heading in that direction is the only worry?
Well, a lot of things have to be in place, right? You have to really believe that this blockchain that is supporting the whole Bitcoin system is true and fair and cannot be tampered with, and so on and so forth. That you should be comfortable not having your money in a bank which is backed by a central bank, and they say that this is your money and you can have a deposit insurance scheme also, and so on and so forth. So a lot of things have to happen for people to really believe that we are just going to get up one day and say that this is the...
So the other side of the story, if this is not going to happen, then basically it is worthless. So even the price which is there today is not relevant.
It might have some worth to it in certain circumstances. Let's say in countries like, so Jamie Dimon said that in certain countries which are struggling, let's say Venezuela, they are not doing well. So there people are using Bitcoin. Where you have hyperinflation, you may use it as a store of wealth and a means of transaction, because to a certain extent it is. So that's sort of the idea. So it may have certain use cases.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone. Please join us for drinks and dinner. Thank you, Nandan.
Thanks a lot.
Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son. There are ups and downs, glorious highs, and sometimes a low that leaves you feeling defeated.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes. But when the chips are down, we must stand up, dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Volatility. It's a funny thing. It makes you question yourself and wonder if you've made all the right decisions.
Sure, you can question some of your decisions, but stay steadfast on your goals.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.